Ladies and gentlemen, the Prime Minister.
How do people inspire other people? Napoleon said, "A soldier will fight long and hard for a bit of colored ribbon." The invention of radio made inspiration much easier to reach the masses. Radio is a one-way dialogue, and those who could master it with speech could control and inspire nations. Oratory is the only superpower that a human being can possess. The hero of this podcast used it for good, but this power has more often been used for evil.
From the old Tucson studios in Arizona, this is the 1 Minute History Podcast. Here's your host, the hardest working man on the internet, Cassanaya.
This is Winston Churchill's most famous known quote.
So bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its commonwealths last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour.
He ended his speech with that phrase. The speech was a half an hour, and he ended it with the best line possible. Earlier in the speech, he talks about World War I and the defeat of the German Empire then, but simultaneously admits blame to the international community's overreaction against Germany, which led directly to Nazi radicalization.
During that war, we repeatedly asked ourselves this question: how are we going to win? And I do not remember that anyone was ever able to answer it with much precision, until at the end, quite suddenly and unexpectedly, our terrible foe collapsed before us, and we were so gorged and glutted with victory that in our folly we threw it all away.
Now, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. It's the reason I am doing what I'm doing. Evil is referred to as the dark side in the Star Wars mythology. Yes, I know it's not expressly equal according to the whole mythology of it. Settle down, fanboys. I'm one of you, all right? For the purposes of this, we'll just call it evil. In the film, Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, the dark side is said to be the quick and easy path. This concept that evil is quick and easy is one of the most informed and important concepts ever expressed in film history. It's not an inherently obvious concept. Evil seems like the more difficult decision to make, but the more you study and observe evil actions, the more it is proven that the more difficult decision to be made is the moral and righteous decision. Fascism, totalitarianism, oppression, persecution, racism, homophobia, discrimination, callousness, rape, violence, inferiors and superiors. These are all the quick and easy path. These are all evil actions. Humans have built governments based on fear and intimidation since the beginning of civilization. It is the more difficult decision to create and abide by a government that is democratic, peaceful, adherent to freedom and civil liberties, fair, kind, respectful, and honest. The clash of World War II is the ultimate rejection of fascism and the start of the modern age of democracy. The rejection of the quick and easy path. And people don't think that I am blind or purposefully avoiding the sins of America's past, Britain's past, France's past. The past of the Western world is fraught with oppressions and colonial racist exploitation and slavery. For fuck's sake, Britain went to war with China because China didn't want them to sell them any more opium, and Britain said, fuck you, buy our opium. The British Empire did this not just once, but twice. Fucking twice. Franklin D. Roosevelt, the great American president during the Depression and World War II, created internment camps for American citizens of Japanese descent. Winston Churchill, the man named by the BBC as the greatest Briton of all time in a 2002 poll, has a lot to be ashamed of. He used white supremacism, the quick and easy path, to justify British colonialism. Rebellion against the Brits were understood as a strong aboriginal propensity to kill. He said of Palestinians that the Aryan stock is bound to triumph. There is a few undeniable examples of these shitty, bigoted statements. Winston Churchill was a man who was seduced by the easy thought of white supremacy. Democracies can, with certain policies, take the quick and easy path. Democracies are governments, so they can avoid making mistakes. The big difference between governments is that democracies have a mechanism to expose and vilify these evils, root them out, and cure them, or cut them off like a cancer. The path of evil is much easier in fascism. In fascism, fear, death, and racism are used as powerful motivators. This was accomplished with the help of a new form of leader, the great orator of the time. Mussolini and Hitler delivered speeches that would persuade an unguarded person into feeling powerful and superior. Just listen to the words as spoken by the orator Dwight from The Office, as played by Rainn Wilson.
Have you ever asked yourselves in an hour of meditation, which everyone finds during the day, how long we have been striving for greatness? Not only the years we've been at war, but from the moment, as a child, when we realized that the world could be conquered.
This is Dwight comedically reading one of Mussolini's old speeches, just translated into English and for salesmen. I needed a good example of one of Mussolini's speeches to be read aloud, and literally this was the best example I could find. When you don't speak German, Hitler sounds silly. Some crying, angry, impertinent, petty dictator, piece of shit, asshole. Then you hear the people cheer when he is introduced. He is not just liked. He is worshipped.
Es spricht der Führer.
As he approaches the podium, he stands for a moment in silence. Then he begins his speech. The sixth day of the movement has come to an end. What appeared like a show of political strength for millions of Germans outside of our ranks, for hundreds of thousands of fighters, it was ultimately more. The great personal and spiritual meeting of the old fighters and comrades in struggle and perhaps a cross-section of you, despite the forced civility of this review of our party, will return with courageous hearts to the days in which it was difficult to be a National Socialist. Can you imagine that? This asshole just said, "Remember how brave it was to be a fascist back in the olden days?" Of course, it was always easier to be fascists. It was never brave, because it is the quick and easy path. It's very easy for the sniveling twerp Adolf Hitler to engender power in the listener. So as long as that power means dominion over another. His whole speech is littered with the language of superiority. It's an easy thing to be a fascist and to be seduced and ordered about by fascists. It's difficult to disobey evil. So by this principle, it would be a harder challenge to motivate those that fight for democracy. You can't just tell them to fight because your race is more superior than their race. So how does Churchill do this? Never was so much owed by so many to so few. It's just 11 words, but those 11 words have a beginning, a middle, and an end. They tell a full story in just 11 words. Whereas a fascist would bloviate, blindly, angrily spitting their words, Churchill could conquer your heart with just 11 words. Winston Churchill was a great man. And so, George W. Bush had a bust of Winston Churchill in the Oval Office to associate him with the charismatic leader's fight against real fascism. The incoming president, Barack Obama, had politely returned to Britain. Hussein Onyango Obama, Barack Hussein Obama's Kenyan grandfather, was imprisoned without trial for 2 years and tortured. All of this for expressing resistance to the forceful ruling of Churchill's British Empire. Only for expressing an idea was he jailed for 2 years without trial and tortured. If there is one thing that I would like you to take away from this show, is that there are things to be reconciled and understood about our heroes and heroines. As the Wear Sunscreen song says, a song that I partially live my life by, advice is a form of nostalgia.
Dispensing it is a way of fishing the past from the disposal, wiping it off, painting over the ugly parts, and recycling it for more than it's worth.
This advice is about
trust me,
advice.
on the sunscreen.
And it would be immoral to paint over the ugly parts of Winston Churchill, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Ida B. Wells, Walt Disney, Martin Luther King, Pope Francis, Benazir Bhutto, Abraham Lincoln, or the Founding Fathers. It's also unfair for us to judge the dramatic, positive thrust of history that these people have contributed to the world by saying that it's all tainted. There is a difference between these people and Lance Armstrong. That piece of shit did nothing by himself. He was tainted the whole time. But to deny or ignore the dark side of the people we want to emulate would itself be an act of evil.
Brother and sister, together we'll make it through. Oh, yeah. Someday our spirit will take you and guide you there.
1 Minute History with Cassanaya on YouTube and the podcast can only be heard if you share this with your friends, post it, and talk about it with others. To support 1 Minute History, please visit 1minutehistory.com. That's the digit 1, minutehistory.com. For 1 Minute History, my name is Cassanaya. Good night, and have a pleasant tomorrow.